dress. At Cybertronics of New Jersey, artificial being has reached its highest form. Universally adopted, Mecca, the basis for hundreds of models, serving the human race in all the multiplicity of daily life.
I really saw it as a sort of an adventure story where this little boy is living in a very sort of middle class, upper middle class environment, which is very controlled and very simple to look at. The clothes for that, we just did a very classic American clothes, not too much color, not too much shape. Tried to do generic clothes that wouldn't date too much, so the film could look periodless. And so I tried to do, to give it the science fiction element, just very classic generic clothes. And then had a bit more fun with the adventure as that boy goes off on his, once he's thrown out by the mother.
Oh, I have to go!
Then the adventure starts.
Should get in there. Boy. Hey, what's your name?
So then we got much more inventive for the clothes. But even then, the clothes were very controlled. I didn't go into a mad fantasy land. Even Rouge City if you look at it, is very, very controlled.
Couldn't tell a joke from a poke.
I think originally when we started on the film, it was going to be a much more fantastical, much more catwalky, fashiony. And I think as Stephen worked through the film himself, I think he brought it down into a more real place. And so in the end, I tried to do a sort of futuristic Las Vegas city that had all the elements, trashy people, classy, sexy people. Like when you go to a city isn't populated with one style of people. And so I usually get a series of photographs, and in fact for this I did lots of pasted out boards with all sorts of photographs that had nothing really to do with anything, except that when you looked at them all, it gave an atmosphere. And then I tried to design the atmosphere, not the clothes.
Hey, Joe, what do you know?
Hey, Jane, how's the game?
I can't accept this!
Well, with Frances playing Mrs. Swinton, we had her over at the wardrobe, and I just tried on literally hundreds of clothes on her just to see what worked. And usually you don't have the luxury of that time to do that, but I must have had her there for about, 2 or 3 times for 4-hour sessions where I just went and got loads of clothes together, and we put them all together and then out of those sessions we photographed everything, and Mrs. Swinton just started to emerge out of that process.
Sorry.
It's like rehearsing. It's the designer rehearsing with an actor, like a director would rehearse the scenes. We rehearsed the clothes.
He's a gift from you.
The process for designing Haley's character was actually the most difficult of all for the film, because when I started early on, Stephen and the production, they weren't really sure how robotic everything was going to be. The robots hadn't been designed, and he was playing a robot, but they didn't want it to look too robotic. And we all agreed originally that the clothes and the look would be much more robotic and slightly stranger and more science fiction-y. But as Stephen worked on the script and as he worked into the film, I think he carried on thinking about it and writing the script and made the boy more and more real and less robotic.
When's your birthday?
And in the end, we used very ordinary clothes. I just controlled the color and the pattern, and then they did that very simple stylized makeup on him. And we came down to a very, very simple look on that boy.
Try and narrow it down.
New category.
Stephen wanted him originally to have we talked about Dracula and other romantic heroes from the past, and I think what he wanted to distill was the essence of a sort of romantic, sexy hero. Take the elements of those with a dangerous quality, and then take all those elements and distill them down and then push them into a slightly futuristic thing. And quite by chance, I found this material, which is actually fishing line woven as a satin. And it looks like on the screen like liquid metal. And we just made a sort of basically frock coat suit and give the frock coat a slightly Victorian feel to it, which was a traditional, and originally he had a big cravat, but we decided to lose that and make a much simpler, it was actually a plastic shirt we made in it.
Patricia, once you've had a lover robot, you'll never want a real man again.
And then V. Neal, worked endlessly as we were doing, we did hundreds of versions of clothes for him. The makeup gives him just enough unreality, and the clothes are basically made of plastic. yet they're made like normal clothes. I did endless romantic shirts, and the one we came down to is my idea. It looks a bit like a sort of a robotic Victorian romantic hero crossed with sort of Elvis Presley in a way. You know, that's really the look, I think.
It's Joe. At your service.